You got nowhere to go!
The only law that matters is gravity.
What you have just seen is the final challenge of the Ozaki Eight in the film Point Break, the act of ultimate trust. It is the most shocking action in the protagonist Bodi's life, letting go off the cliff. But have you ever considered this? What if this is not merely a suicidal display of extreme sport? What if it is, in fact, a metaphor for an exceptionally profound state of being? In everyday life, many of us live in a very different kind of struggle. You may be capable, intelligent, and disciplined. You try to manage your life, your work, your relationships. You plan ahead, predict outcomes, minimize risk, and hope that things will unfold as expected. And yet, very often they do not. If this sounds familiar, you are not alone. From a Zen perspective, this tension has a name. It is the constant opposition between the self and the world, a state in which the subject tries to control the object and the object continually resists. Zen calls this the conflict between subject and object. So what does this have to do with Bodi's leap from the cliff? Everything. Because the ancient Eastern wisdom that seeks to dissolve this conflict has existed for more than 2,000 years, and step by step we can begin to understand it. At the moment Bodi jumps, he is not conquering the waterfall, because conquest itself implies opposition. In that instant, every mental calculation about whether I can control the world comes to a complete stop. This is non-contention between subject and object. There is no jumper. There is no abyss being jumped into. There is only the leap itself. The act of ultimate trust is not trust in luck. It is trust born from a complete realization of non-duality, of subject and object no longer standing apart. The moment Bodi steps off the edge, he is no longer a survivor trying to control life. He loosens the tightly clenched hand and gives himself entirely to emptiness. In ancient Eastern Zen Koans, there has long been a phrase, letting go at the edge of the cliff. And the eighth challenge, called Ultimate Trust, is precisely Bodi's moment of letting go. At its core, this challenge resonates deeply with Zen's central insight, the breaking of duality, the disappearance of subject and object. So although Point Break is undeniably a Hollywood action film, the inner structure of the Ozaki Eight carries a strikingly strong Zen sensibility. It can even be seen as a modern Zen Koan, one expressed through extreme physical practice rather than words. Why would we say this? Let's take a closer look. In Zen training, there is a powerful expression, a great death of the self, followed by great awakening. This does not refer to physical death, but to the complete collapse of the ego, after which true freedom becomes possible. Each of the Ozaki challenges, the spirit of force, the breath of wind, and others, pushes the human body deliberately toward the edge of death. When someone is wingsuit flying at 200 kilometers per hour or standing at the edge of Angel Falls, the brain's ordinary sense of self, the ego, is overwhelmed by fear and sensory overload and temporarily switches off. In that moment, the practitioner no longer asks, "Who am I?" They are forced into a state of no self. This corresponds precisely to what Zen calls awakening after total relinquishment. Only when all supports, physical, psychological, and conceptual, are completely abandoned can one's true nature reveal itself. Only in that instant of letting go does the true self, the original face, the person of no rank, finally break free from social rules, fear, and inner constraints. And only then does genuine freedom become possible. This is what Zen describes as a great death of the self, followed by a great awakening. In that moment, all calculations about controlling the world come to a halt. The thought, I conquer the waterfall, simply does not exist. If there were conquest, the self would still be clinging to I. If there were fear, the self would still be dominated by the external world. At that moment, Bodi is no longer a diver. The waterfall is no longer an object. Human and nature, life and death, movement and stillness collapse into a single experience. This is the deep Zen meaning of non-duality, the erasure of subject and object, forgetting both self and world. Of course, in classical Zen koans, letting go at the cliff was never meant as a literal act of jumping off a mountain. The cliff refers primarily to a mental precipice, the everyday attachments we find hardest to abandon, personal gain and loss, identities and titles, emotional dependencies, and the habitual divisions through which we interpret the world. This state of letting go cannot be reached through logic or reasoning alone. It must be directly experienced. In Zen, this is called realization. At the top of a 100-foot pole, one stands unmoving. Though this is attainment, it is not yet the truth. At the top of a 100-foot pole, one must take a step forward, and in that step, the whole universe reveals itself. 百尺竿头不动人，虽然的入微为真，百尺竿头须进步，释放世界现全身. This famous Zen verse was composed by Master Changsha Jingchen during China's Song dynasty. At first glance, it describes an almost impossible physical feat. To stand, unmoving, on the top of a 100-foot pole is to possess extraordinary balance, discipline, and concentration, a level of mastery far beyond ordinary human capacity. And yet, Zen tells us this is still not the truth. Why? Because even here there remains something to rely on. There is still a pole. There is still a place to stand. True freedom, Zen insists, lies beyond even this stability. That is why the verse continues. At the top of a 100-foot pole, one must take a step forward. This step is not an act of improvement in the ordinary sense. It is the courage to step into groundlessness, like letting go at the edge of a cliff. There is no support beneath the foot. No calculation can guarantee safety. And yet the mind does not cling and fear does not arise. In that moment, when even stability itself is released, the entire world appears in its fullness. This is Zen's direct teaching. Only by letting go of even the highest attainment does one encounter true freedom. So you might ask, what does forgetting both subject and object, or transcending duality, actually mean in modern, everyday terms? One way to understand it is through analogy. Think of the human brain as a computer running a pre-installed operating system, an OS built entirely around comparison and distinction. It automatically divides the world into opposites: me versus you, success versus failure, subject versus object. Here lies the deeper mechanism. As long as the mind is still sorting reality into self and world, still judging things as good or bad, beautiful or ugly, it remains locked in duality, and what you perceive is no longer the world itself, but a version of it processed through mental algorithms, a filtered image, like wearing blue-tinted glasses in the snow. No matter how long you look, you will never see pure white. In the everyday goal-driven world, the world of deliberate action, the subject, the self, is almost always locked in struggle with the object, the world. Our mental algorithms, the everyday ego, are constantly trying to control outcomes, predict the future, and eliminate risk. But the world rarely cooperates. This ongoing tension between self and reality is one of the clearest expressions of duality in Zen thought. And this compulsive desire to control is precisely where fear and suffering arise. To transcend duality does not mean becoming passive, detached, or giving up effort. It means shifting from victim mode to observer mode. Reality may destroy your plans, but it cannot destroy your essence. This is what we might call the unbreakable resilience, a form of strength grounded not in control, but in inner stability. In Western culture, the thinking of Charlie Munger is widely admired. He once said, "I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor." This mindset is undeniably powerful. It pulls people out of passivity and helplessness, but from a Zen perspective, it still operates within the framework of duality. So the question becomes, where does the limitation of the survivor mindset lie? The limitation is subtle. The moment you call yourself a survivor, there is still a solid worldly self at the center of experience, a self struggling against an external world. It is a process of subject versus object. You may win, but you remain locked in tension. Zen offers a different view. Not subject conquers object, but subject and object no longer contend at all. From this perspective, the highest form of wisdom is letting go even of the label survivor. If self and world are no longer divided in the first place, then concepts like victim and beneficiary lose their footing entirely. True unbreakability emerges when you no longer define yourself as either a victim or a survivor. At that point, you enter what Zen calls emptiness, not nihilism, but a state of radical freedom. It is a freedom that does not depend on conditions, outcomes, or control, a freedom that holds even when all supports are gone. This is often described as freedom in groundlessness, a freedom that remains intact precisely because it stands on nothing. And this comes closest to what Zen means by letting go at the edge of the cliff. Reality becomes unbreakable to you because only the worldly self, titles, plans, possessions can be destroyed. What cannot be destroyed is the essence that has forgotten both subject and object, what Zen calls the original face, the person of no rank. Like empty space itself, it cannot be cut by a blade nor burned by fire. This leads us to a new way of understanding human experience, 3 distinct modes of being. The victim mode says, "The world has defeated me," a low-dimensional view. The survivor mode says, "I have defeated the world," a mid-dimensional view, the logic of strength. The Zen, as the observer mode says, "When self and world are not two, where can victory or defeat exist?" Zen practice is not about becoming passive or weak. It is about gaining a form of absolute strength that transcends winning and losing. This is what we call the power of letting go at the edge. Most of us may not possess the material success of someone like Charlie Munger, but every one of us deserves this kind of ultimate inner freedom. And through simple, genuine practice, through learning to let go at the edge, that freedom is within reach. You might ask, can this letting go at the cliff exist in ordinary daily life? The answer is, absolutely. If Zen only existed in cinematic extremes, it would be nothing more than another form of sensory stimulation. For everyday practitioners, the cliff is not in Venezuela. It lies right at the edge of our own thoughts. What we need to clarify is this. In daily life, letting go at the cliff does not mean physical danger and certainly not self-destruction. It means a break in habitual consciousness. Here is a simple practice. The human brain is a tireless control machine. It is constantly calculating, is this good for me? Why did they look at me that way? What if I fail? This is subject versus object. When you feel anxiety, anger, or an urgent need to control a situation, recognize this as your goal-driven mind gripping the edge of the cliff. At that moment, try a quiet withdrawal of attention. Do not fight the emotion. Do not follow it. Do not act it out. Simply remain aware, watching the urge to control, without expecting any outcome. That, in itself, is a small act of letting go at the cliff. It sounds simple. In practice, it is not easy. But if you can do this even briefly, you are already stepping into a form of ultimate human freedom, something increasingly rare in a world overflowing with desire, distraction, and pressure. True Zen reveals itself precisely in the moment you face life's hardest problems, when anxiety peaks and the urge to control becomes overwhelming. At that moment, try a final act of inner trust. Soften your grip, allow a small smile, and you may discover this: you did not fall at all. You simply became one with the vastness of empty space. There is an old Zen koan from China's Tang dynasty that captures this state with remarkable precision. It comes from a dialogue between layman Pang Yun and the great Zen master Mazu Daoyi. Pang asked, "Who is the one who does not keep company with the 10,000 things?" In other words, who is the absolute subject beyond all phenomena, beyond all attachments? Mazu replied, "When you can swallow the waters of the West River in a single gulp, I will tell you." At first glance, this sounds absurd. So how should we understand it? This answer is not a refusal. It is a push at the edge of the cliff, an invitation to let go. It is Pang Yun's moment of mental cliff letting, because swallowing the West River in one gulp is impossible. And yet, what Zen asks you to live in is precisely this state that cannot be reached by ordinary logic. A present moment beyond subject and object, beyond linear time. This is not merely the now often simplified in Western Zen books. It is the absolute immediacy of the present. Mazu's reply forces Pang out of dualistic thinking. The moment you try to calculate how to swallow the West River, you have already fallen back into duality. But if you suddenly see that the worldly self doing the calculating is unnecessary, and that the absolute present itself is the power that swallows the river, then you become the one who does not keep company with the 10,000 things. This is a classic example of Hua-Tu meditation, where doubt is driven to its absolute limit until the mind abruptly releases its grip. That release is the letting go. Great intelligence can build the world, but wisdom learns how to live in it. They master systems, data, and complexity. But do they understand Zen? Perhaps not. If you do, life tends to unfold with less struggle and feel a little lighter.